Hello, everybody. I'm Jeffrey, and this is AutoAlchemy. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but today I'll be doing a typewriters video, and I'm here with Rebecca Pebble, who is an ENFJ. Rebecca, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what your channel's about?
Yeah, so I am Rebecca Pebble. For those of you that haven't gone over to my humble little channel, I primarily focus on Myers-Briggs personality typology, but I like to also veer off into my own little creative paths as well. So I showcase writing and my art, and I also have a new segment called Musical Musings because I love to talk about music. And I also am into self growth and development. I am nervous about this because it's been a while myself. Uh, but yeah, so self growth and development kind of tied in with personality types and also a little bit of comedy. So it's kind of a little bit of everything that encompasses myself, I guess, in a way. It's kind of my creative outlet, one of them, but primarily with MBTI and self growth.
Awesome. Yeah, everybody should check out the channel, and not just because I was recently on for the musical musings segment. That was really fun, so I'm glad you had me, and I'm glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is
Yeah,
exciting.
absolutely. So, like I said, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but the purpose of this series is, well, as everybody knows, I'm interested in writing. I'm a writer, and I like to think about how typology can influence the way that we write and maybe inhibit the ways that we write. So, like, how do we work with who we are, the material that we have to become effective writers and communicators? So, I guess we'll get started by stripping away all the typology talk. I want to know a little bit about your journey as a writer. Like, when did you start, and what has that process looked like? Have you
Mm.
been, committed ever since the beginning, or is it a
Yeah, well, for me, it started at a really young age. So this is something that I've had with me since I can remember. I just remember in kindergarten loving to read. I was already able to read, and my teacher would give me books to read, and to me, reading and writing are sort of they go hand in hand. And so
Mhm.
naturally, I started writing. Um, I can even distinctly remember my parents divorced around that time, and something I did when I was visiting my dad was to write my own books, and I would hole punch the sides and take string, or sometimes I would staple it together, and I would even illustrate. I made my own books
Yeah.
just in my free time. And so it's funny because I hadn't really thought about that until you told me about this interview, and I had to think, well, when did I start writing? And then,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I was like a little self-publisher as a kid, and so it kind of just grew from there, where I just always remembered enjoying English classes all the way through high school and college. And so it's always been a very good outlet for me.
Mhm.
Something that, as of late, I'm taking a little more seriously.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know I would go down this path, but I'm exploring it now, thinking, this actually could be a career path or part of career path.
Do you have any like specific memories of some of that early writing? Like, what were you writing about back then?
Ah, I really wish I could remember. I actually should have reached out to my dad to see if he has them still and if he could have shared those with me, but I didn't. That's unfortunate. I don't know. I'm trying to think if it might have been about animals or something, I would imagine,
Yeah.
or people, uh, but I don't know exactly what. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I can remember I don't think I've talked about this and these videos yet, but in the fourth grade we had to write a story about ourselves in the future. And I was writing a story about like I was like going through this high-tech city on a hoverboard, eating a
Huh?
slice of pizza on my way, like with a guitar strapped like over my shoulder.
That's so cool.
on my way to a concert that I was going to be performing at, and I remember this one girl, like we had to do like this buddy exchange, like I'll read yours, you read mine, we'll critique each other, and she was just like, "You, a rock star." And it really, like, that moment will never leave me. I thought it was really funny. And now I think it's funny. At the time, I was like, that's not very nice.
Oh,
Among other things that were running through my head. But
that's funny.
um, okay, so what about more recently? You said you've been taking it more seriously. So what kinds of things are you writing?
I think so. I'm trying to think of when the tides turned, and I think it was around the time when I started taking improv classes, which
Okay.
was 3 years ago. I
Mm.
kind of decided because that's something that goes hand in hand. It's improv and writing because you're making up dialogue on the spot
Right. Yeah.
and you're creating a world on the spot essentially. And so I remember thinking, I want to get back to this. This is something I sort of uh, put to the side. I journaled every now and then, stuff like that, but I didn't take it super seriously. And so then I started revisiting poetry again, and that's when I came out with one of my poetry books that is on Amazon called Eating the Apple,
Mm.
a book about my spiritual awakening. And then I started thinking, well, I could do some sketch comedy. And so I got together with my improv troupe and we actually created a sketch show that was performed. We wrote and performed it at the Orlando Fringe Festival,
Mm.
which was pretty neat to actually see something you've written come to life
Yeah.
on stage. That was pretty cool. Um, and I had written plays in grad school and musicals and things like that. But
Wait,
they never,
I think we need to slow down there. You have written musicals?
well, yeah, well, I should have with a caveat, but there's no music. I'm like the Tim Rice who needs her Elton John. I,
Oh, I see.
I need to find my inner Elton that I
Okay, yeah.
haven't had to play. Because I'm not a composer. I can play music, but I just don't, I think that's a whole different part of the brain. I don't know, or I'm just too scared to try it. Yeah, I have dialogue and the lyrics. I can hear the songs in my head. I almost need somebody that can,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. That's awesome. Um,
Thanks.
so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but do you tap into that improv talent when you're trying to write? Like, are you able to like embody a character and then do like a dialogue between characters in your own work?
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't know if that comes from improv or my theater background or what, or just being a neurotic crazy lady. But yeah, I do. I can imagine the scene. I think that, and I guess this will go into the ENFJ strengths probably when we get there about people and conversing and dialogue and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But yeah, I can kind of naturally, that's something I feel really confident about is the dialogue. And sometimes I find myself even making faces or or changing my posture at my computer because I'm trying to embody the character as
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so different from what I do, but I feel
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, that's something that I want to emulate a little bit if I can.
Oh, do you have the dialogue in your head and you're just typing it kind of
Um,
or
I think character voicing is like the hardest thing for me, so I kind of know the essence of what they would say, but then it will take me like, I don't know, 10 tries to actually get the words right and in a way that feels like it's unique to this particular person. Because I don't really like that kind of information, I just tune out anyway. Like even with people who are in my life, I couldn't tell you like with some exceptions, I couldn't really tell you like what kinds of things my mom might say. Like I wouldn't be able to like imitate my mom very well. I could do her voice, but not the actual dialogue. Dialogue.
that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So then what's the trade-off for the ENTP? The strength then?
Oh, hmm. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm trying to. Maybe it has something to do with not getting so constrained by how things specifically are in the sensory world that I can, because like even my fiction is kind of like, even when it is supposed to be realistic, it's kind of like untethered a little bit. It's like a little more than real. It's kind of like hyper real in this weird way where everybody is still clearly a character,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I don't think I'm explaining myself well. But there's just sort of like a stylization that I have to go to because I can't really like get those kinds of details right, that I get a little more colorful and like, and I also like interject myself as a narrator a lot and make like kind of witty comments. It's not everybody's cup of tea necessarily, but I think that's how I do it. I have to lean on those strengths a little bit.
Okay. Oh, that's really
Yeah.
fascinating. Huh. I
Yeah.
actually hadn't considered that. That you would need to interject to sort of, I don't know if it's compensating necessarily for the dialogue that you feel needs a little something, but I,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Well,
making
it's like because I don't have anything in my arsenal but my own voice. That
sense.
gives me like another way of using my own unique perspective. So I get to interject, or I don't know if I get to, but I let myself, and then if
Yeah.
people hate it, they hate it. We'll see.
Nah, I'm sure they love it.
Okay, so we you did mention your type there for a second, so I'm pretty curious. With the poetry, you talked about your spiritual awakening.
Mm.
I was wondering what other ways do you maybe see like the way that being an ENFJ is like thematically coming through in your writing. So I feel like there might be like a spiritual kind of awakening seems very like NF to me as one theme that could come through.
Definitely. I noticed that a lot of my writing is very people focused or
Mm.
relationship focused, and so I think and themes of um, it's sort of like an inspirational themes because I do have a nonfiction work called Living to the Top of Your Intelligence, which is basically the tenets of improv, using the tenets of improv to live your best life.
Hmm.
Stuff like that, where it's sort of me trying to, if I'm not connecting with my audience to try to inspire them, maybe characters are inspiring or very much, it's very human based, I guess you could say. I don't know that I deviate too far from that, even if had
Mm.
fantastical worlds, which come to think of it, I don't think I've written anything recently that's too abstract. It always comes back to that sort of humanity.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's
sense
I
of
think that can connect a little bit to what we were saying before with you being good at like getting into the voice, and I feel like I'm playing more with like the ideas, and so the characters are just sort of like vehicles for the ideas.
mine is very character driven stories.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That would make sense considering our functions.
So yeah, people focused. It's about connection, inspiration. What are some do you have any concrete examples of other things you've written?
Let's see. I actually had all the genres I like to tap into. I had to make a list so I didn't forget
Okay.
any. um, I've written some children's books. Now, the ones that I've actually seen the light of day, there aren't too many. But my Google Doc, my Google Drive is just it's chock full of just different things from different genres.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think specific example of a children's book that I have. Oh, I okay. So one of the ones on Amazon is called Chakra Boy. Again, a spiritual theme, and it's just an inspirational piece about being yourself, even letting the inside show on the outside.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's really cool. I I've only ever dabbled in trying to write a children's book once. And again, we can use a compare and contrast here.
I love it.
Because mine was so like it would have been so alienating for a child, I think.
Oh,
Um, like I had a friend who worked like very closely with children, and she knew like the kinds of books that a kid would read at all the different ages and like what's developmentally appropriate. And I had no context for that, so I just wrote a book because I had what I thought was a cool idea. Um, this is gonna sound pretty creepy, but that's okay. So I had this concept of a character who could steal birthdays from other people. So
oh,
it's like one of the kids in town becomes the birthday thief, and what he doesn't realize is that he's also stealing the time as well. So he like is like enjoying all the fruits of his thievery, but then he like starts becoming an old man very rapidly,
oh, wow.
and it's like kind of like existentially horrifying.
It is, but I love it. You have kids crying everywhere.
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean,
Ah,
suffering is a path towards enlightenment, I think. So as long as we can get them suffering sooner.
all right, we can enlighten Tigger. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know that that will ever see the light of day, and probably for good reason.
You could, well, you could do maybe like those adult children's books. I don't know if you've seen them. It's kind of like Go the F to Sleep. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I can't think of who narrates that, the
Oh, it's
audiobook.
Samuel L. Jackson, I think.
I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's an
Maybe
idea. Yeah.
it's
That
like a
could
little
be
spark.
that could be fun. Okay, so cognitive function wise, and maybe you don't have to be limited to the functions, but when we think about ENFJs, you usually think of like a certain a certain skill set. So how are you seeing that particular skill set come through in your writing? It's probably going to overlap a bit with what we've already talked about, but do you have anything else you could add on that?
Yeah. So the FE, which we've already covered. I think now my NI personally, I don't think is as strong as some ENFJs, but I think if you had a stronger developed NI, it would be good for sort of focusing and figuring out the arc of the story. And
Okay.
for me, I don't know what that is. It could be because I'm a jumper in the OP system, but I struggle with that a little more than I feel like I should. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so that could be something for other ENFJs.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting because to me, just because our FI is in the lower four, I actually think it could become our greatest strength if we wield it correctly. Because I actually find that my creative pursuits are actually my FI kind of spilling out either on the page or on the canvas.
Hmm.
And that's where I do my best work, I think. And I,
Huh.
I would venture a guess that other ENFJs, and now I'm kind of getting into your question about giving advice. Sorry,
Now you're good.
that just fit the stereotype, right? The mental. Let's go ahead and work it now. Um, I would say to tap into that FI because wow, it's really powerful. I think because if it's been neglected for a while and you
Hmm.
tend to it, it's like
A
breathing
rush.
in air.
Yeah.
Yeah, after having been suppressed for so long. Um, so I actually think that can be an ENFJ strength, even though I think most people wouldn't think that. Um, at first glance, you wouldn't, but
Hmm.
I find it to be true, yeah. And if you think about it, like Martin Luther King Jr., how powerful that speech is, it's FE and FI kind of
Yeah.
work in conjunction. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's really good. I don't think anybody's ever said anything about like the shadow functions or the bottom stack. So
Mm.
I think that's awesome. I mean, I was just talking about this on Megan's channel, like talking about the shadow functions and kind of integrating. So I like what you said a lot about like if you've neglected it long enough, there's going to be a lot of charge there. So if you know how to work with it, then maybe you can turn it into something else, kind of convert it into the gold.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, some
yeah.
alchemy, if you will.
An alchemy. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Okay, so what about weaknesses? Do you think that there are any weaknesses. It doesn't have to be like ENFJ weaknesses per se, because I feel like if you just answer from like a true place, and there will probably be overlap
Hmm.
anyway.
Okay, because I originally was thinking in the context of an ENFJ, and so I guess I'll give you. I'm like, I already have my answer, Jeffrey. My
That's okay. I'm just giving you options. I can't help it as any ENTP.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would say our FE can actually, it's funny, even though it's a strength, it can also be a weakness in this case. And this also goes for me personally, not just because I'm an ENFJ, but I don't typically prefer to be alone or do things alone. And I think in order to write or do a lot of creative things, you have to carve out that alone time, unless you're collaborating, which I actually have a couple collaborations I'm doing now, which is nice because it breaks up the introverted activity of writing.
Mhm.
um, so I would say that the FE, you almost have to, as an ENFJ, just kind of tell it I love you and you have good intentions, but you're going to sit in the corner for now.
Mhm.
Keep yourself occupied. I have to focus on other things. um,
I love you. Everybody loves you. Sit down.
it's okay. Because otherwise, yeah, you'll be thinking, what am I missing out on?
Hmm.
I wish I feel so lonely. Why am I not doing this with other people? You just have to be okay with, this is my art and this is my process and this is my time to tune into who I am and listen to my FI and my TE and get it out there. So that's one weakness, I think, is being okay with it being a solitary activity. Which for
Okay.
introverts, they're probably thinking, "What? It's amazing, you're alone." But
That's part of the appeal, yeah.
yeah. But for me, the appeal isn't that it's a solitary activity; it's creating something and getting to put that FI on the page.
I gotcha. Do you feel like there's any way in which you are trying to get a TI through your writing, or does that function not really play a role?
I can kind of see it directly expressed in something like the improv book I was talking about, where I
Yeah.
actually literally give reasons why um, following the steps of improv can make you a better person. Not steps of improv, I'm sorry, the tenets of improv. So in that case, I think when it's nonfiction, I kind of TI it. But
Hmm.
I don't know that I do in fiction, actually. And I think that's probably why I really enjoy poetry. That might be one of my favorite things to write, is because I kind of can put that subjective art out there, and it's kind of like it's open to interpretation, and I
Hmm.
don't have to give reasons, and I
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
a little mystery there. I like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
poetry is probably the one that's the most alienated from that perspective, which is one reason that I like to write poetry. It's like, how do I feel like I'm in a completely foreign land, and that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of exciting in some ways.
Yeah, it is. That's cool that you write poetry as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the kind of thing that comes in waves. So I
Mm.
will write a ton of poetry during like the span of a month, and then it's like, okay, that was my poetry phase for the next couple of years, and then I'll be motivated at some point. But yeah, it's just something I dabble in whenever it occurs to me.
That's interesting because, okay, so you write in multiple genres as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
So do you find, and I'm thinking your comment just made me think of this, that you just go through periods where you enjoy writing in one genre more, or do you find there's one that's consistent and then the other ones kind of pop in and out, or how does that work for you?
That's a good question. I think it's some kind of combination of all of those. So essentially, I think that fiction is something that's pretty steady. Like I'm always working on something. I'm always coming back to something, even if it's not every day. It's usually like every couple of weeks I will revisit whatever project I have going. worst case scenario every few weeks. Um, and then on top of that, it's like I will layer in other things as kind of like dessert.
Oh,
So it'll be like a little bit of poetry and then a little bit of trying to do nonfiction, which is probably like the hardest thing for me to do.
mm-hmm.
Just because I don't find it very like in stimulating. Like it's like I feel like I'm too bound by like the concrete details of reality, and it becomes very much a chore.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of tough. I also I also have dabbled in a little like screenwriting and playwriting and like I said, I did a children's book. I also wrote for a Nickelodeon fellowship contest. I did a screenplay, like a children's TV show script uh, for that. So yeah, I like
Cool.
to dabble, but I like to have fiction as being like the main thing that I can come back to.
Right. Very cool. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of stability with that part.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering about the SE. Like I can clearly see how SE might be helpful with improv, but do you think that with writing it serves you at all?
I think, huh, I hadn't thought of this too much before, but in a sense, it can help with inspiration
Hmm.
sometimes because I mostly find inspiration in people, but also in nature too. So I think observing something, it wouldn't take much, and then I would kind of have a story ready. Um,
Hmm.
and also, maybe because I'm an FE jumper, it does kind of keep me almost moment by moment a little more than too future focused. Um, and maybe that does serve me in some ways because, for example, I'm collaborating on a book now, and it's each chapter is a different character's point of view. And I know with it's funny because I'll meet with my friend and she'll say, "Okay, so what's the story arc going to be?" And what's like, well, um, take it take it in moment by moment. And so it was nice because she's an INFP and we were able to she was able to give me some ideas to play off of and go, okay, how about we do this? And then I was able to focus it.
Hmm.
Um, so now that I think about it, I don't know if SE is helps me in that way or not. I mean, in a way, I guess it could because then I'm sort of very present to what I'm writing. Um, but but to the detriment of the NI. I
Right.
guess it makes
How about in the nature of like how detail oriented your writing is? What does that look like? Is it
oh, it's
no?
that's one thing. That is one weakness I will
Hmm.
say is that I kind of want to say when it comes to fiction especially, and that's why I think I lean towards poetry because it's kind of just wanted this happened and this, and I don't want to really get into too much of the leaves were this beautiful silky green of yeah, I don't know, that's not me. So I think that's
Yeah.
my core SI.
Okay. Yeah.
I wish I was better at details. Are you pretty good with the details?
No, but I'm kind of like obsessed with them in a weird way. Like I'm not like blind to the fact that I need more details, so I definitely make a point to like try to be good at it or try to improve upon it
Yeah.
whenever I can. Like I spent like an entire year one time writing a single story, like a pretty short story too, just because I was setting it in like during like the Mexican American War, and I wanted to make sure I got all of these details right, and like what kind of weaponry are they using, and what are like the clothing that they would be wearing, and like what's the dialect going to be like in this particular area in Texas, and it's like
Yeah, that is fiction is intimidating
yeah,
to me because of that for that reason.
that's exactly why I'm like slowly steering towards a more like playful kind of fiction where I don't have to be as
Mm,
like detail oriented. I don't like to set things in particular moments in time necessarily. I don't
Mhm.
want to do like a set piece.
Right, right,
Yeah, or a period piece rather.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also wondering about your FE and how you, this is kind of like outside of the actual process of writing, but how are you with receiving feedback?
Oh, that's interesting. I when it comes to my writing, I think I would rather have strangers looking at it and critiquing it rather than maybe I think some friends, yes, but maybe like family members, I don't know that I would want them critiquing my writing.
Hmm.
Um, I think it depends, and this is true really across the board for all the creative pursuits that I do. It kind of depends on how the feedback is given. I don't mind it as long as it's not coming from a place of harsh judgment.
Hmm.
But if it's something that I can see and understand and it's coming from a good place that's going to help me improve, then yeah, it makes sense and I can go with it. Um,
Hmm.
but it is, I will say, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm super sensitive or what. I don't know if this is FE or if this is just who I am personally, but it is very hard to receive feedback and criticism. As I get older, I'm getting better at it, of course, but it's still it can be hard when it's not positive. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, I put a lot of time and effort, and this is it's kind of like me. I'm expressing myself in a way. Um,
Yeah.
Thankfully, with writing, you're a little more removed than if you're acting or singing. But it still stings, because it is a part of you.
Yeah. Amen.
I was gonna ask, yeah, how do you feel about receiving feedback?
See, to me, it's like the opposite where it would be more hurtful or I would be more sensitive about writing than anything else that I do, but mainly because I identify very much with being a like verbally fluent kind of person. And I like really take my time if I'm writing something and I feel like I'm tweaking and revising and it feels very much like a rejection of my identity because
Mhm.
I've like put so much thought into it and I'm like putting my big TI check mark like, yes, this is the good stuff. And I mean, I understand that not everything you do will be good for everyone. Like that's clear to me. But there's also a way in which it feels like you said, like I worked really hard on this. It
Mhm.
almost feels like a rejection of the whole process, or
Mhm.
like it's not respecting the fact that it's not just the words on paper that are being rejected, but like the time and energy that goes into creating something. And yeah, but I'm generally pretty good at accepting feedback as well, and kind of like picking my battles or knowing like, well, this is clearly not going to be for like my mom is not going to be the audience for this or
Exactly.
whatever. Um, and I think I'm generally okay at writing to and picking my audiences. So it hasn't been something I've had to deal with too much, thankfully.
Yeah, that's good. I would imagine as an ENTP, you're very good at knowing your audience and being able to sort of charismatically work your
Ha.
way to charm that audience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying.
Yeah.
But you don't always know. And so that's
Mhm.
tricky.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's see. We've talked a bit about weaknesses. In general, are there any tools or tricks or techniques that you use to help you get into the mood for writing or to revise your writing or I know this is a little bit more expansive than the question that I gave you to work with, but
Yeah, we can on my notes. Well, it's funny we mentioned our poor SI because that's something that I am very aware of. So, in order to overcome that, and this is goes along with memory more so than details at this point, but I have an app on my phone that I use where I will just, if something inspires me and I know I can't get to my computer at the moment, then I can just type it in there. So that's a good tool. If you're a writer or if you're a creative person and you don't have an app or something on your phone that you can just quickly put your ideas in, I highly recommend that because that's been a lifesaver. Because
Have you ever done any like voice recording of ideas?
I have, and it's mostly been music, but now I'm
Hmm.
starting to think maybe I need to do my writing that way. It would be an interesting thing to try. Have you done that?
Yeah, I do. Like, if I'm somewhere where it would be kind of awkward to write something, or I'm also not really a fan of writing things by hand,
Hmm.
and I don't like typing my ideas on my phone. So yeah, usually if I have an idea on the go, that's how I do it. Or I'll
Oh,
even make a video. Like sometimes I've just started making a video while I'm driving, and it will be like the phone will be pressed into a seat or something, and so it's just black, but you can hear me kind of like dictating and talking through stuff. So yeah,
ah, okay. So is it just your ideas that you record, or do you actually have you written entire stories
I've
by speaking?
no, I've done some poetry that way, or I've like gotten the ball rolling and kind of formed the outline of a poem, and then kind of like reshaped it afterwards. But yeah, that's the only way I've been able to do that.
Yeah. Um, so tools, you said my space, and that's funny because I was thinking that would be some of my advice for the ENFJ is your environment, making sure you have your a process or your environment's just so. But you're right. I usually do try to set up my environment with. I have my office that I usually write in, so I'll just have a candle and the lighting and turn on some music, and I like to write. That's usually my favorite way to
Hmm.
write. Lately, I've been using my laptop a little more, and so I do like having a space though designated for writing, ideally.
Yeah.
But sometimes coffee shops for certain writing, not a lot. I mean, there's some that I can't do there because I can't really focus too much. But others I actually like writing in a coffee shop sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to other people speaking for like inspiration for character voices or character
Uh,
ticks?
that's a good idea. No, I haven't done that, but that's a really good idea.
I've not done that, but I've had it recommended like in different classes I've taken.
Yeah. Huh. You could just take a line of dialogue and that could even start your whole story or whatever. You
Yeah.
could, yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah. People say weird things sometimes, things that
Yeah.
I would never conjure up in my own head, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. Might as well use it.
That's right. Exactly. Okay, let's see. So you've given a little bit of advice.
Yeah.
Is there, I think we're kind of reaching the end of my questions here. So is there any other sort of advice you would have for a young ENFJ writer out in the world trying to do it big, be creative, and kick some butt?
Aw, yeah. I have a couple things. The first thing is to just write anything. It doesn't matter, even if it's journaling. And actually, I highly recommend journaling. That's something I'm trying to be more consistent with is a daily journal. I have a blog. I actually have a music blog, but I
Oh.
haven't been keeping up with it. That's where music kind of veered from.
Yeah,
Uh, but so if you love blogging, blog, but I think journaling, especially for an ENFJ, is very beneficial because I think there's a lot of stuff going on inside of us mentally, emotionally that feels very abstract and it's hard to process. Like, even though we're feelers, people would be surprised. Sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling. It's like I'm better knowing what other people are feeling than what I'm
mm,
feeling. Sometimes, not always. Sometimes I inaccurately read. But uh, so journaling is a really good way, I think, to process those feelings and to kind of get to know yourself better. Because as a young ENFJ, you're probably more concerned with other people and those relationships and making sure you're there for those people, which is great. But if you want to be right, you're going to have to sacrifice some of your time and your energy for you, essentially, which is going to feel very selfish for an ENFJ, but it's not. It's not. It's not. I promise. It will actually benefit you and your loved ones in turn because you're going to be happier, because you're going to be able to express yourself, and they'll benefit from that. So think of it that way.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way, you're still helping others and loving them by loving yourself. So yes, I think making your time and your craft a priority, no matter how you do it, if you're just on an app, whittling away, whittling, is that a word? Whittle, waddle? No.
I'll take it.
Um,
Kind of like
but,
Shakespeare. You're coining new things here.
oh, I love that. Thank you. So, yes. Sorry, Jeffrey. This is where I'm getting passionate and excited. I didn't realize this is
Oh.
probably my favorite question.
Oh, okay. No, that's totally fine. Have at it.
People and what they can do. Here's my FE going crazy. Yes. So write anything however you can, because to me, I really think it's a craft, it's a skill. As long as you're doing it, ideally every day, right? If you love writing, um, you're honing that skill. And so I would say don't be intimidated by, do I need to submit to a contest? Do I need to reach out to a publisher? Do I need to get an agent? Um, do I need all that stuff? You're getting too far ahead. That the NI go, it's okay, NI. Again, we'll put that one in this corner. You're just gonna have a house full of bad functions. And so, oh gosh, now I'm losing my train of thought. NI in the corner. Sorry, Jeffrey, get into my metaphor.
Nobody puts NI in the corner.
Like a pebble. But yes, okay, don't get too far ahead of yourself, beautiful ENFJs, because and any type really. Your time will come. I think it's just in the meantime, it's doing what you love and doing it for the sake of doing it and because it brings you joy. And from that, everything else will spring forth. So writing anything, that's advice number one, or nugget number one. Number two, I would say play with different genres. You might be surprised. There's maybe you're not a novelist, but you could write a novella, or maybe you think you're not a poet, but you don't know. You could just do free form, or maybe you want to do songwriting, or try sketch comedy. That could be fun. And remember that you can collaborate. So I know in my first piece of advice, I said you're going to need your own time, but then also remember you can collaborate with other writers. That could be a fun way of writing. So look for other fellow writing friends and maybe start a writing group. That could be
fun. Yeah.
And the last little bit, hopefully this doesn't take up too much time, Jeffrey. No. Okay, good. Don't forget to lean into your FI and find your voice and your truth and to speak it because the world needs it. I know we're scared of what people think, and but don't be. Put yourself out there. The world needs your brilliance.
Yeah, I think the journaling that you recommended could help people kind of find that a little bit more, kind of sift through the details of their own psyche.
Right. It's important. Yeah. Sometimes it's messy up there.
I actually have a bonus question for you. Something you couldn't prepare for. Whoops.
Bonus round.
Ding, 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 ding. So I'm just curious about like what sorts of things you haven't written yet that you would like to write. Like what's on the agenda? What's on the like think as big as you want. Like what's on the to-do list creatively?
Oh my gosh. What I want to do. I think, well, for me currently, the few projects I'm working on, I want them to go places. I guess for them, maybe go beyond just a book, but maybe a musical.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I'd like to see it in different forms, but I don't know if that's really answering your question.
No,
You're,
I think a musical is something that I had in mind whenever I was asking the question.
oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I think one day I'm gonna have to actually get serious and finish my musical or start a new one probably because I mean this is old. It's back from undergrad, I believe, so
Hmm.
it's probably not very good if I read it again. So I might have to start over.
Mm. Hey, maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One can dream.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Is there any sort of like channels you want to plug, or do you have like, do you want to plug your Amazon, or like where are you pushing product?
Oh, oh my gosh. Well, I have my Amazon books. It's gosh, I think it's amazon.com/author/Rebecca Pebble, but I
Okay,
know
we
if
can share it in the description if that's not
people
right.
share it, yes. And a lot of those are for Kindle. So
Mm,
that's something that I just thought of. If people want to self-publish, that's kind of a nice route to go
yeah.
in publishing because you can just put it right out there and you get a little bit of a cut from the sales, which is nice. And I also have RebeccaPebble.com. Yeah, my YouTube channel is pretty much
Yeah,
the
yeah.
feed for all of it. I think currently, I don't know if that's how it'll always be.
Well, awesome. Yeah. Check out the YouTube channel and everything else will fall in place.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you, Rebecca, for coming on today. I really appreciate having you.
Thank you for having me, Jeffrey. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you next time. Bye,
All right.
guys.
Bye.